Hello everyone, welcome. This video on natal moon in Gemini comes to you from my bedroom. Just thought I would give you a different background. Actually no, it's just been a long day and I'm kind of hanging and chilling and feeling like sitting in my bed while I do nerdy computer things. But before I go and commit to those nerdy computer things, we'll talk about natal moon in Gemini. That's not talking about the moon being in Gemini when it's passing through Gemini, which it's already gone through at this point. Anyways, this is if you were born and the moon was in the sign of Gemini at your time of birth. If you don't know if that's true, you can plug in your birth info at astro.com or astrotheme.com, or dump your birth info with the time if you can in the comments, and if I have time I can look it up for you, but it's always really good to learn how to do things for yourself if you're really that interested. So the moon, as we've talked about in this series, is the celestial body of the emotional security, our knee-jerk reactions, which in a more positive, less hurtful light can be our carefully cultivated responses. Sorry, I know it looks like we're in a boat here. We're not in a boat. It can be the carefully cultivated responses or the triggers, and it's often the emotional state that hangs around in our subconscious. The moon's qualities developed mostly from birth to about age 7. It's not to say that that's a hard and fast rule. And our early childhood has a lot to do with it. And so the moon often points to our relationship with our parental figures, because the moon is the body of the mother. It often talks about the mom. And I find that with moon in Gemini subjects that the father tends to be the one that is more overtly influential, but that the mother has a different role. So we'll get into that in a second. The moon's word is security, and Gemini is all about communicating. And with Gemini, you get two people, and this doesn't necessarily mean a bad thing. A personality like that doesn't have to be two-faced, although it can be. And in this moon series, we've also talked about how finding security is never external. It's always temporary when you look at it that way. So there's a very unevolved, still figuring out life and your own sense of being your own port in the storm. And that's more of an unevolved expression of the moon. And then as we get older and we start being able to count on ourselves more, and we learn about our own ability to create the reality before us, and to work instead of with visceral reactions to things that are triggering us, to finding a nice space between the bodily reaction that comes up, and then finding a way to transmute that into a more carefully designed response that is not hurtful to yourself or to the other people, and can start eliciting different responses from other people. So that's a more evolved way of expressing your moon sign. So for moon in Gemini, it's all about communicating, talking, expressing. They could probably sell water to the ocean if they really wanted to. The moon in Gemini has the ability. It's not necessarily deception. They just kind of have a way with words, and there's a salesmanship quality to that, particularly if it's something that they're emotionally involved with, right? So moon in Gemini can seem superficial because they're often dealing with emotions on an intellectual level, and it's very easy for a moon in Gemini to deal with emotional issues or emotional baggage in a way that's very cerebral, and they can come across as heartless, but that's generally not the case. You have to have a very specific set of planets and aspects in the chart for that sociopathic quality to be present. However, depending on other planets in the chart, this is usually not a very good way to deal with things. Emotions happen in the body. You can do all the scans that you want to see how the temperature changes in the body based on different emotions. You can look at different studies that have been done that show you that certain emotions, certain reactions travel down to the lower part of the torso before they ever make their way to the brain. And so it's not a leap to say that emotions that don't move out of the body I'm not going to say that the emotions get stuck, but the nerve impulses can get stuck in one spot and certainly can wreak havoc on the body, just like people who are always, let's say, spending their childhood cowering in fear if they've been abused in any way. There's no doubt that that they come with a little bit more of a rounded shape in their body. And the people in their childhood that for whatever reason were forced to take on a lot of responsibility or to be the person that creates peace in the house, they tend to have that chest thrusting posture. And there's of course other bodily things too. So if the emotions don't actually move out and they get stuck in the head, then what that really can turn into is somebody who over time assimilates those unprocessed emotions either through anger. So if we're talking about somebody like a sun sign that has more deeper emotional state, we'll talk about Scorpio or maybe any water sign really. So a water sign with an air sign moon is going to be a little confused anyway because the two elements don't quite mesh. And in the case of, let's say, Pisces, that's a square aspect with Gemini if the degrees are right. I've known a couple of Scorpios with Gemini moon, and that's a really strange set of energies to have. Those two signs are in conjunct, so it doesn't even matter if the degrees are really close together. It's just you put a Scorpio and Gemini together in the same chart with such two important planets or planetary bodies, celestial bodies in this case, and there's a lot of back and forth. So some people can express it as anger, some people can express it as sadness. A lot of people will express it through humor and through being the person that knows everything. There can be a lot of security found in knowing things, being the person that has all the information. And it can be scholarly, it can be based on a particular subject in school or a game or a profession. Moon in Gemini feels most secure when they're learning new things and they can get a leg up on all the people around them. So, with that being said, Moon in Gemini also has a wonderful ability to be calm and cool in a situation. A little different from how Moon in Taurus is calm and cool because there's a lot brimming under that coolness in an earth sign. But with the air sign, there's a fantastic ability to look at a situation and just be able to see it at face value and see the ridiculousness of any drama that's being brought into it. Similarly, Moon in Gemini can put a lot of drama into stuff depending on their internal state as well. And there's really nothing that's super deep in Moon in Gemini in terms of, unless they have other parts of their chart that point to this, they will tend to sort of hop around to different subjects, learning different things, different people. They'll want to be friends with at different times based on how they're doing emotionally. Again, this is if they're more unevolved. An evolved Gemini understands why they feel the way they do. They tend to fill voids with, again, being that person that knows everything. So there's a lot to be said for the moon in Gemini learning a little bit about a lot of things, or again, if there's any more intensity in their chart and a desire for higher education in general, like let's say some Sagittarius hanging around in there, or even some Virgo that may or may not be squaring that Gemini moon. The desire to learn may not all be from an emotional security standpoint. It could just be because they just want to know. They want to know more. They want to be better at their job, and that's fine too. Fun thing about Moon in Gemini is that often it's often indicated that they're in their childhood they may have moved around a lot. So I actually find a lot of military children have Moon in Gemini, which is really kind of fascinating. And that doesn't never mean you have to move all over the country or over the world, but there is a certain transiency to a Moon in Gemini subject's childhood, and this could be from certain things. A lot of it will depend on what house the moon lies in, but let's say if the moon in Gemini in the 4th house, then you can almost be guaranteed that the home, the residence changed quite a bit as a child. Sometimes it's the people that come in and out of their lives that are super influential. Like they might have, let's say, a father that has lots of girlfriends or multiple wives, or vice versa. And then in other cases, it can indicate a childhood in which both parents were not exactly equal on the emotional scale. They might have, in some ways, represented, two different sides of the Gemini. And a really interesting thing about Moon in Gemini, too, regarding the childhood, is that often there is a parent that glosses over things. So whether one parent is glossing over another parent's inappropriate behavior, or a parent just glosses over all of all the bad stuff that the kid does, maybe they aren't ever held accountable for it, which is really dangerous, particularly for Gemini Sun and Moon, because they are so susceptible to their environment, and because it's also the sign of early education and siblings. They can be way more influenced or traumatized, depending on the situation, by what was going on with their siblings. So if they ever figured out that there was unfair treatment or people were being treated differently, then they tend to sort of blame the sibling. Oh, you were treated like this. You were mommy's favorite. You were daddy's favorite. And therefore, any of these bigger planets in Gemini tend to be really good at the blame game. You have to remember that Gemini, at its worst, is a narcissist, and at its best is kind of like what Russell Brand's a Gemini, and what he's come to be after his addiction. He's super open to all sorts of things, and he sees the silliness and everything, and yes, he still participates in some of the silliness and the celebrity and that sort of thing, but a really evolved Gemini moon is kind of like, a jester. They totally understand that they're being laughed at, but they're having fun doing what they're doing, because nothing really should be taken all that seriously, even emotions. Emotions change all the time. And if this person with the natal moon in Gemini can understand that, and they don't have too many, challenging aspects to their moon, particularly from Saturn, that could be a hard one, then they can realize that their fluctuating emotions and desires to learn different things and hang around with different people, they don't have to be a bad thing. Fluctuation does not have to be negative, but it should be conscious. In my opinion, when you're mindlessly flitting from subject to subject and from friendship to friendship, and constantly changing allegiances with your parents or your siblings, And you don't really know why. That's probably not healthy for you or the people around you. And so then you have to kind of look to yourself and say, am I taking the time to deal with my shit? Am I taking the time to deal with anything that I felt was out of my control when I was younger? Is there any unfair treatment that I felt like I received? And if so, can I sort of let it go and stop repeating that treatment to other people? Geminis are great mimics. And again, there's nothing wrong with mimicking people, but it's when it's unconscious that it's an issue. So if there was a parent that was particularly harsh, or let's say just basically maybe on the other spectrum, they weren't harsh at all. They never made the subject be responsible for anything. Everything was a joke. Everything was just very light and fluffy. And if the moon in Gemini unconsciously takes on these behaviors without knowing where they are, then they start to embody the very things that they rally against, which again is part of where the two faces come from. It's not necessarily malicious from a Gemini point of view, but because they don't understand what they're mimicking, then they rally against the very same thing that they're blaming their bad luck or their whatever it is in their childhood. And it's not that every person has a negative childhood, and everybody has different views of it. Think about different siblings that grow up in the same house. Some of them might have the same moon sign, others won't. And it all depends on their perspective of the relationships and the dynamics going on in the house. And, of course, their own unique personality mesh. So, some people who have the moon in Gemini, I'm ready for this. I have it. Let's see. I'm trying to remember here. Moon in Gemini. I'm going to just look this up real quick. We've got Sigmund Freud and moon in Gemini. Jim Carrey is a Capricorn with moon in Gemini. That's a really interesting combination, because those are also two signs that don't have quite a strong understanding of one another. They are coming from different places. Let's see, anybody else? Jennifer Lawrence is a Leo with moon in Gemini, and those degrees are almost exact, so there's a trine going on there. Sometimes she does, like, you can kind of applaud her for speaking her mind, but every now and again she says something that's like kind of dumb, and she doesn't mean it, but there's not much thought going on. Barack Obama and Vladimir Putin both have moon in Gemini as well. And let's pick one more person that you might care about. Somebody put a birth chart for the Virgin Mary. That's kind of interesting. So based on whatever history people are going by, they think that the Virgin Mary was a Leo with the moon in Gemini. That's kind of strange. Although it could explain the tall tale. Well, hold on a second. Let's try to get somebody else here. Somebody else. One more person. Oh, no. Okay, I'll just Franz Kafka, Jackie Chan, and Julianne Moore. There. Just some fun stuff to work with there. If you have natal moon in Gemini, or you're not sure you do, like I said, you're going to have to grab yourself your birth information. The time will come in handy, because if you were born on a day where the moon changed, you might need to know that. What else do I got here for you? Anything good? So the big takeaway here is processing emotions, making sure that you're not embodying the very qualities in other people that you rally against, and making sure that you see the humor and the lightness and everything, but do not fear feeling the deeper feelings, because things do need to be felt viscerally in the body, and more than just like anger or defensiveness. Feeling love deeply, feeling anger so you can morph it into sadness, which maybe can morph into hope, and just allowing things to be dealt with on multiple levels. And that could be done through a lot of different things. But due to the mental agility and constant mental action of somebody with Moon in Gemini, especially because they can overthink their emotions in a lot of ways, things like meditation are really great. Anything that puts you out in nature and away from stimulation can really help with the emotions here. All right, my 20 minutes is up. The next video will be Moon in Cancer, which is its home, and that'll be fun. Moon in Cancer is good. And then we'll just keep going down the line. So I hope you like the videos. If you're enjoying the astrology series, it would be great for you to like the video just so I have a little bit of feedback. If you're looking for more after the moon is done and you think I should continue with some more things, I'd like some feedback there too. Feel free to subscribe, and I hope you guys have a really awesome rest of your whatever you're doing right now.